At the new Plainfield Backus Emergency Care Center, we're opening new doors to better health. More than just a 24/7 emergency room, the new center provides services you and your family need to get better, stay healthy, and be well. Choose wisely. Choose Backus.
Charnier, I'm the editorial page editor, the editor for the opinion pages at The Day and theday.com. I'm joined today by Lisa McGinley, who's our assistant managing editor, and Lisa has index cards. I've already gotten quite a few of them, so we can have, if you have questions for the candidates, they can come through the moderator, myself, and we'll get as many of them as we can asked. Also here tonight, Julianne Hankel, some of you probably know, our reporter and our photographer, and doing double duty on the video camera, Dana Jensen. So tonight's debate is for the 38th District House seat, and our candidates are the incumbent Democrat, Representative Betsy Ritter, and the Republican challenger, Tony Saragusa. And we thank them for participating. The 38th District covers all of Waterford and also the southwest slice of Montville. And so we're happy to be in Waterford and to have this chance to talk about the issues. We've got the camera rolling, and the video of tonight will be available on theday.com. For those who maybe can't make it tonight, they'll get that opportunity to watch it on the internet. We have kind of a loose format tonight. We're not having a running clock. I will give about 90 seconds, up to 90 seconds each, for opening statements from our two candidates, and they'll have about a minute each for closing remarks. We get to the end, we're going to go about an hour. Or until we run out of questions, which I don't think will be a problem tonight. There's no time on the back and forth during the debate, but I will ask the candidates to try to be succinct. And if someone is kind of dominating the format, I'll move things along. So we'll get started. We've been doing at the forums. We'll be giving the challenger the first chance to open the comments. So let's start with you, Tony, and you have about 90 seconds.
Hi, I'm Tony Saragusa. I'd like to thank The Day for putting on this format. I served 4 years in the Air Force, and I am a Vietnam vet. I got a job with the state of Connecticut DOT after the service, and I worked there for 29 years and retired. I also joined the Connecticut Air National Guard and am retired military. My wife and I live at Hillcrest Jensen. I've been married 44 years. The community is an over 55 community, and they have a handyman group, which is volunteers. I'm considered the resident plumber. I serve on the Water Pollution Control Authority and the Planning and Zoning Commission in Montville, and I also serve on the Southeast Water Authority. The reason I'm running is to bring service to the residents of Montville and Waterford. The legislators in Montville there's 5 of them. They have over 70 years of experience. Waterford has 2 with 28 years of experience. The Day generally likes people with experience on their endorsements, so you have to take a look at what they've done. You know, they have given us the largest tax increase in Connecticut in years. We are the second highest state for gasoline prices. California beats us a little. Our credit rating was downgraded because of our financial conditions. We don't completely fund our retirement program. Montville also got a bonus of the sex offender facility. You know, we people in Montville weren't too happy about that, and we kind of thought with 5 legislators with 70 years of experience, they might have done something about it. Thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Saragusa, and Representative Ritter.
Thank you. I'd first like to thank The Day for this forum. you do provide an opportunity for discussion of these issues that are important to all of us in the community that would not exist otherwise. Secondly, I want to welcome everybody tonight and thank you for your attention and for your questions that we'll be having. And finally, thanks to the Waterford Public Library for the use of this lovely facility. These past years, I have had the honor of serving as the state representative for the 38th District, serving Waterford and Montville. In that time, I've sat on the committees on public health, appropriation, and energy and technology. I'm also a founding member of the Results-Based Accountability Subcommittee, and I serve on several task forces and budget subcommittees, mostly around health and hospitals, human services, and most recently, shoreline preservation and prescription drug abuse. I sort of take this health stuff a little seriously. Before I was elected state representative, I was the elected tax collector for the town of Waterford for 7 years. There is no mistake that job maintenance and job creation is the biggest challenge before us today. Our state's economy historically has been subject to greater economic fluctuations than we've seen in the national economy, meaning that when things are good, we experience perhaps better highs, a stronger economy than we might see nationally. But when things are tough, the drops for us are far more devastating, and it takes longer for the state of Connecticut to come back. Certainly, history shows that to be the case. It's critical that our attentions be turned to building an economy that is more stable, more robust, and more resilient to those swings in both the national and the world economy. Our task, especially our task to talk about today, is to build on the jobs legislation and the start that we were able to make towards doing that in the most recent session in the legislature. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, first question, I want to start with Representative Ritter, and we'll just go back and forth and talk about the issues. And I'm going to, I've gotten some questions on voting. I'm going to try to put a couple of them together. So kind of a two-part question. Part one, do you support a law which would make photo IDs necessary to vote in order to prevent voter fraud? Why or why not? And do you think early voting is a good idea? So first crack at that, Representative Ritter.
Thank you, and please correct me if I forget to address any aspects of the question. First of all, there's been enormous national discussion over photo ID for voting. And the first thing you have to understand is what is required in Connecticut to register to vote, and that is a positive identification. When one goes to vote, one identifies themselves, but in Connecticut, the photo is not required. If you don't have it with you, you can sign an affidavit attesting that you are that person. We don't have instances of voter fraud in Connecticut that would require a change to that bill, and I don't believe that a change to those requirements, and I don't believe there is any reason then to go ahead and do that. And the second piece of the question,
early voting, should Connecticut join states
about early voting. I was pleased to be able to support initiatives that expand our access to absentee voting, and one of the reasons for that is that I believe that paves the way for us to look at early voting like we see in many states across the country. Fortunately, a year like this, we have an opportunity to really look at and evaluate those experiences because many, many states have taken on early voting. I look positively on early voting as an opportunity for us, and I'm looking forward to that analysis with the hope to support it.
Mr. Saragusa, voter ID and early voting.
Well, I don't have a problem with the system we have now. I mean, generally, probably 98% of the people, when they vote, they show a photo ID. I mean, the rules say you can actually take a letter envelope and use that as identification for somebody to vote. It's always interesting, if you go to the Secretary of State's office, you got to show them a photo ID or you can't get in. So, I mean, you know, the state's got kind of a double position there. So, but generally, I think it works pretty good. I work at the polling places usually, and everything goes very smoothly.
And the part of the question was early voting. What would you think of Connecticut?
Well, I don't necessarily believe early voting really does anything. I think it's kind of nice to have one day and everybody does it the same. Absentee ballots should be sent out early, and I have no problem with that. I mean, some of the candidates haven't even given all their spiels, and people are already voting. You know, it'd be kind of nice to know everything they got to say before you vote, but I guess some of us don't need that help.
All right.
An opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, so Saragusa, the next question goes to you, and it is, what can the legislature do to help new college grads find jobs in their fields? A big problem with a lot of college graduates unable to find jobs. What might the legislature do to help?
Well, the biggest thing I think they can do for anybody is to help small businesses, lower the regulations on small businesses, decrease the taxes. I mean, so many people are encouraged to go to college and get the best degree you can get. Well, in the real world, there are not that many jobs out there for college graduates. I read something, I think it was 65,000 lawyers are going to come out of school this year, and about 25,000 are going to get jobs. So the others kind of wasted their time. And when you go to school, you got to pick your field and understand your job opportunities when you get there. You know, there's no way to really encourage businesses to hire college graduates. They got to want to hire people because they know this is the place to run their business and develop and expand.
Representative Ritter, the issue of college grads having trouble finding jobs. What could the legislature do or has done?
Thank you for that question. And as a parent of two recent graduates, I can tell you that that is a question that is before everybody in our country. It's extremely important, and certainly here in Connecticut. We've been able to, here in southeastern Connecticut, utilize our educational resources in some pretty innovative ways, and I would hope that we would work to expand that. Most particularly, and one of the most successful, several of the most successful programs have been utilizing the resources at Three Rivers Community College and tying them to local specific manufacturing needs. We do that in nuclear engineering, and we do that, I'm going to forget one of them. They have an environmental program, and they have another program that I can't remember what it is exactly that it does. But the point is that those programs have been developed with our larger employers in the area and tailored to the academic and career needs of the students, and they attract qualified students who then have jobs waiting for them when they're finished. So that would be the first thing. The second would be beginning in at lower levels of education, beginning in high school, and perhaps even middle school. Many people advocate, I'm not so sure about those middle school kids, but bringing the opportunities for students to understand what is out there and what is involved with their future career decisions, and integrating that in a more positive way with the curriculum. We're seeing that also start to happen now, the initiatives that we've made in the education bill, but also initiatives to then make that translate into higher education more freely. At Three Rivers, again, you see a middle college example. I think that's another great opportunity that can help us help our college grads be more prepared for jobs in the future.
All right, thank you. And the next question goes to Representative Ritter, and it's, has the state legislature and the governor done enough to meet the promise of implementing general accepted accounting principles gap?
Right up my alley. Thank you for that question. Do I think we've done enough? We tried to do a lot more and had to scale it back, so I would say no, but we've paved the way to get there, and I am pleased to see that we've been able to hang on to that promise. And I believe it is in, I'm going to forget if it's fiscal 13 or 14. I believe it's beginning, let me get this right, January 1st of 13. We will be taking another major step towards utilizing GAP. There's some really important and critical reasons why we need to do that. The issues around proper evaluation of our liabilities and how that relates to potential cash flow and cash flow issues for the state treasurer problems are created by the fact that we don't have a true GAP, that we use a governmental accounting system. So I don't believe that we're where we need to be. I think we can get there. It's going to take a little time, I'm a little frustrated, as I often am, by the amount of time, but I'm very pleased at last that we've paved the way to get there.
Mr. Saragusa, is the governor and the legislature going fast enough to meet that promise to implement GAP?
Well, they promised it to us, we didn't get it. It's a lot easier to work on your budget if you don't have strict rules to follow, because you can take a little money from Peter and give it to Paul, and it kind of balances out. So it'd be wonderful they would do what they promised. I always look forward to people that promise me things to keep their promises. So I see it as just slipping of doing the job right. I mean, why would we be rated so bad in our bond ratings? We just are not fiscally responsible. The state of Connecticut didn't get into this financial problem today or a month ago or 2 years ago. They've been working at it for 20 years to get us this screwed up. So, it's just very difficult to trust them.
President Ritter,
I would like to respond a little bit to that, because the issues of GAP, I think, have been perhaps used in the discussion for different purposes than what it actually represents. The GAP issue describes an accounting process. Formerly, we had a system referred to more loosely as governmental accounting or partial governmental accounting that all the states used. Over time, states have started to realize the wisdom of converting to what is considered to be a full GAAP accounting system, and some states have started to do that. It's been a problem that's been faced by all states, and Connecticut included. And while Connecticut has not accomplished that conversion, and for many of us as quickly as we might like to see, at least we've begun that process. I would also like to point out that under required financial reporting, a reconciliation of those two is required now when this state and every state presents its financial statements. So to describe it as a sort of a mystery accounting system is not actually quite accurate.
well, that's correct. If you wanted, Mr. Saragusa, there were...
Well, I don't think I mentioned it as a mystery, but it's just a promise is kind of a promise, and I kind of expected it to happen pretty quick. I was wrong.
All right, thank you. Next question is to you, Mr. Saragusa, and you've called for a 2% cut across all state agencies with a couple of exceptions. Question is, given that the governor negotiated a no layoff promise, is that possible to really get to that number without layoffs? And what kind of cuts in services might people expect if you see that kind of a cut, 2%?
Well, the way I had 29 years with the state. I worked on budgets. I worked in different areas, aeronautics, ports. So I've seen a lot of things. And as a financial officer in DOT told me, he said, if I can't find a few $1 million for the boss, I shouldn't have this job. So there's money there. Also, one of the favorite practices when I was working was they always have an equipment budget and furniture and whatever. The state agencies, the last month before the budget runs out, they order every piece of equipment they can get and spend every dollar. To suggest there's not money there, I don't agree. To think that it's going to cut services, I don't think so. So, it's a matter of fact, there's money there. The responsible managers should be able to locate the dollars to turn it back in.
Representative Ritter, tighten the belt, cut 2%? Doesn't sound too bad, does it?
I think that there's a couple of different ways to look at that question. The first question, if you want to evaluate it in its overall sense, is 2% a reasonable amount? I don't think anybody here would particularly or necessarily quarrel with that without any analysis. What I might take objection to is the method of determining how that would be accomplished, and I'll tell you why. When across the board budget cuts are mandated in that manner, generally that's the type of one-size-fits-all government solution that can be very, very difficult and takes no account of programs that work well or programs that don't work at all. It may very well be possible that more than 2% can be eliminated. I don't know that right now without that analysis. But if I were to start out by simply saying an across-the-board budget cut with certain areas exempted, I'm not exactly sure why, but they're lucky enough to be exempted, might not produce a result that is or might not produce a budget that is in any way related to results. One of the things I talked about, the results-based accountability process, is a process that attempts to evaluate those programs so that we can make those more intelligent decisions.
Ms. Saragusa, just the argument that just cutting 2% across the board doesn't pick and choose where you really should cut.
Well, the governor has a responsibility to say, hey, all you agencies are going to cut 2%. I exempted corrections and the state police because I think corrections probably has the greatest overtime budget that exists. But if a commissioner goes through his budget and can't find the 2%, I'm pretty sure the governor would say, what is your problem? Why can't we cut your agency? And I think he's reasonable to listen to the individual and make that decision. But if you don't give people directions to start, they're never going to cut. How many budgets ever go down? Has your town taxes gone down? I mean, they don't go down. But the governor has to set some parameters and say, this is what I want. Some agencies may not be able to do that. But if they're not told to try to do it, and if they don't come up with good reasons for not doing it, they'd be in trouble in my view.
Representative Ritter, on the point of layoffs, from his experience, Mr. Saragusa says he thinks you can get there without layoffs. Do you think you could get there without layoffs, cutting back 2% in a lot of agencies?
I think it's quite possible that that's a goal we can look at, and there's no reason not to put it out there, but that was not my point. My point had to do with the methodology and the analysis that you might do. And I'll give you an example. A 2% across the board budget cut would reduce also by 2% direct aid to municipalities. That's currently 15% roughly of our total state budget. I wouldn't like to do that. I would rather be able to be flexible in how I found that overall 2% and got to the desired bottom line. And I think that that would produce results for everybody in the state, not only the people that administer and benefit from those programs, but from our towns and our municipalities as well, that might be a lot happier all the way around.
But to be fair, the Democratic legislature increased spending.
Yeah, in the two-year budget process, it's my understanding the operating budget did go down a little bit in the first year and went up some in the second year. That is true. However, take a look at how we did that, and it was not strictly through imposing budget cuts, and that was not the intent. That was part of the attempt. When you make that analysis, I think you also have to take into account whether you're talking about strict dollar-for-dollar reductions or reductions against required or mandated increases in budgets. Often programmatically, something is set up to start in year 1 and go through years 2, 3, 4, and 5 and grow. When those reductions were made and they were taken out of the growth piece, you're not going to see that strict dollar for dollar. That's not a very clear explanation, and I apologize for that. But I think the point is that I would consider as a budgeting expertise far smarter way to go to set an overall goal and figure out across the diversity of agencies and programs how it is that you have to get there. And a final point I'd like to point out, if I could, I'm a legislator. I can hope the governor does some things when he sets his budget out, but I'm not the governor.
All right, let's move on. And these are one of those competing interests because we talked about state spending. I got a few questions on property taxes. What is the legislature doing? What can it do to try to provide some property taxes? And I had a question in particular about how it affects seniors and other people on fixed income when they see those property taxes go up and can't afford their own home. I think it's Representative Ritter. You go first on this question.
Okay. So it's sort of a general question, I guess, about tax relief specifically
tax relief,
for
and someone
seniors.
specifically expressed concern about those on fixed incomes.
Sure. And Connecticut's property tax system, I don't think anybody, certainly no one in this room, and very few people I talk to, thinks it's a system that we're particularly proud of, or feels that it's necessarily fair. It's inherently regressive. There's no question about it. The difficulty comes when we figure out how else we're going to finance the things that those property taxes now finance. So that said, in terms of municipal aid to towns, which directly affects property taxes, the more state aid, goes to towns in the form of municipal aid, the more relief can be afforded for property taxes. I am at least pleased to say we held the line on that and have not had to decrease that municipal aid in the time that I've been in the legislature. In fact, we had some historic increase to the education portion of that aid in, I believe, 2007, and we have held on to that, and I'm pleased. It was not easy to do it. That's bad news, I know, for everyone that pays property taxes. In terms of the services and the opportunities for towns to work on their property tax bill, there have been various initiatives to change the way those services are delivered, to encourage not just towns, but the state to do more to encourage regionalization and ways to bring greater savings to the town, and I support virtually all of them, at least in their philosophy. In terms of specific relief, there are a couple of state programs that we have also at least been able to maintain. You might recall that in the original budget proposed by the governor this past year, the property tax credit against your state income tax was proposed to be eliminated. We were able to restore it, 60% of it, to $300. I was at least happy to be able to do that. Am I happy about the situation about property taxes? No. Would I like to see more effort come from the state? Yes, but I'd like to have it more intelligently delivered, and I think that is the struggle. Exactly.
Let's give Mr. Servus a crack at that. Property taxes, what might be done, particularly those on fixed income that see those taxes increase?
Well, I actually kind of analyzed the property taxes in Montville as an exercise of saying, how do we help the seniors? And I kind of looked at, reducing seniors' taxes. And the way I figured it out was to reduce it just piecemeal. Because with the seniors paying less, you're not going to have the money for schools. So everybody's going to pay more. So my idea was more to lower the seniors' taxes so much that seniors would want to move into Montville and build and live there because they knew it was a safe haven. There may be some effort in that. But generally, I believe the legislator should provide the towns more money. I mean, they have all kinds of grants for whatever you can think of. We just take the grant money and give it straight to the towns. The towns know what they need to fix and not fix. The grants, as the senior center operator in Montville kind of said, I always got to be a lawyer to figure out how to fill out all the forms and then all the reporting. So if you take the grant money, you give it to the towns, they're going to still have the ability to buy anything they need, and it reduces the property tax. Because property tax is the only way the towns can make money. Even like your policemen, when they stop you for talking on a cell phone or a seatbelt, well, Waterford, I think they get $15 for the ticket. The state gets the rest. These are little things. How often has anybody been stopped for a seatbelt or cell phone? I mean, the town has no incentive to stop anybody and enforce the laws on the books. These are little things, but it would be so much help to the towns.
Is there a conflict, though, in that you want to cut state spending, and if you giving more money for property tax, more money to the towns, it's going to be more money to state spending?
It's like 2 years ago when I was asked, what's my theory? And I said, cut spending, cut spending. I never said I was going to raise taxes. Of course, I don't think you were too happy about that, Paul. But I mean, it was obvious. When you're that far in the hole, the easy way out is to raise taxes. But if you start with talking about raising taxes, you never cut spending. So cut the spending, do the best you can, then you're going to raise the taxes to do whatever. I mean, it's just a practical approach. But if I started out and said, well, I'm going to raise your taxes and we're going to give more money to the town, well, let's cut some of the spending. Then look at giving money to the town, maybe doing away with grants and give that money directly to the town. Probably, the state would probably make money if they get rid of the grants. I mean, it just seems like common sense on things to do to help our communities, because the seniors are hurting. You know, you look at your water bills. The water bills come in, there's a few people not paid, but in water you send them the notice they pay because they know they're not going to have water. But if you check the towns on how the sewer bills are being paid, you'd be surprised a lot of people aren't paying them. You know, so I mean, it's just practical stuff. It's not anything special.
All right, move the conversation along. Next question is to you, Mr. Saragusa, and it's on the approach that the governor and the legislator have taken in leveraging tax money to encourage economic development. We saw the Jackson Laboratories getting over $300 million in state money to try to get that project off the ground, keeping a firm in the state in Stanford, a sizable $15 million gift. So do you agree with that philosophy, that the state direct investment to try to help businesses stay in Connecticut, or do you have a different approach?
No, I think the state should help businesses in Connecticut. You know, they could lower the taxes on businesses. They could make the regulations a little easier. You know, when I saw that they gave $270 million to Jackson Laboratories, I'm thinking, for 300 jobs, that's almost $1 million a job. If you took 270 small businesses and gave each one $1 million, how many more jobs would they have than 300? 900? 1,000, 2,000? These big companies, they know what they want to do. They know where they're going to work. They're going to expand because they want to expand. You don't need to bribe them to stay in Connecticut if they want to expand in Connecticut. They're going to do it. The gambling one, they had plans to expand. Somebody says, hey, here's $15 million. I'll take it. I mean, that's easy. There's no decisions. It's the small businesses that need the support of the legislators.
Representative Ritter.
What's my name over here?
Representative Ritter. You went to small businesses, not Jackson Labs.
Thank you for that particular question. I think that, and have stated several times, that when we build on last year's jobs legislation, I do believe that it needs badly to require increased incentives for new businesses, for small businesses, and what we call micro businesses. But I want those to be businesses that create new jobs. And there is a critical distinction there, as opposed to simply giving money or economic opportunity to every small business. Some of those incentives can come through a variety of ways, and I think we must continue to keep the hammer down on looking at them, absolutely. Streamlining the regulatory oversight, I agree completely with my opponent about that, both within and across state agencies. Those are often incredibly and ridiculously difficult barriers to overcome in today's world of information technology and our ability to share information. We need to create practical financial incentives and initiate the education programs like the ones I talked about earlier. But the key is for this new economy, and a certain amount of our attention, I do believe, has to be on understanding this new economy, because it is a new economy, and a portion of this new economy is going to be permanent. And there was a second point. Oh, Jackson Labs, yes. It's interesting, I've been to, I think, 4 of these forums, and at every single one I hear a new number, usually lower, about the number of jobs that people sometimes feel could or would be created at Jackson by the Jackson Labs proposal. When the proposal came to us, the State Department of Economic and Community Development gave their projections, and I will give them back to you. The project itself is expected to create over 660 positions at Jackson Lab in Farmington within the stated period of time before the loans and payback begins, plus 4,600 bioscience jobs through spin-off companies and another 2,000 in local service and area retail stores. That's pretty robust economic development up and down the economic development scale, from retail and food-based jobs all the way up through those very technology-dependent and science-rich jobs that the labs are expected to produce.
Mr. Saragusa, do those potential spin-off jobs make you feel better about the
Well,
And I forgot
everything is, we think this is going to happen. We want a corridor built off the Jackson Lab things of companies to do all these good things in the state. Most companies are in some state. Most companies have no plans to move. So why would they ever get up, come to Connecticut when we cost businesses so much money to operate here? Our gasoline prices are so high, our energy costs are high. I mean, there's no reason to come. I mean, you can't, you can say anything, but what's the reality of something like that happening? I mean, it's amazing. It's like the casinos with all the spin-off, whatever. I mean, they got a couple hotels and motels. Most people just drive to the casino. They go to the casino malls, they shop, they go home. Yeah, how much spin-off are we getting from the casinos? I mean, I think they're building another hotel up by Foxwood, and the Mohegans even stopped building theirs, but I think we got at least 2 hotels in Montville. They stopped building the hotel down in Norwich over by Walmart's. I mean, that's spin-off? I don't think we need that kind of spin-off.
All right. Anything briefly, Representative Ritter, or do you want to get to the...
I just might point out that we've seen some information on the job creation and retention programs from the governor's office on the first 5, and there have been some numbers reported that are very hopeful. And I would hope the state of Connecticut never stops exploring opportunities like this to stabilize and grow a more robust economy, like I talked about in my initial presentation. And jobs created and jobs retained from the first 5 and from the Small Business Express are reported at thousands. And I think those are really important opportunities. If we don't keep our eyes on that prize, I think it would be a terrible mistake. So I hope we continue this.
Okay, next up. All right, if you just...
I'm not saying don't explore doing things. Of course you explore every avenue that exists. But, our unemployment was 9%. It just dropped to 8.9. That's not a very good record.
Okay, thank you. The next 2 questions, they were targeted specifically at each of our candidates, so we'll start with Representative Ritter. You get to go first. I mean, if Mr. Saragusa wants to comment on it, but it's kind of specifically asked of you, and it's has the legislature and the state prepared what to do if Mr. Romney is elected president and the Affordable Care Act is repealed, or have you put all your eggs in the Obamacare basket?
Great question, thank you. And over the past couple of years, I have worked hard to move the state of Connecticut more closely in line with the opportunities that are there for us in the Affordable Care Act. Already, the state has received, I believe it's a number close to $200 million for a total of not just the grants and the program expansion opportunities, but the creation of our healthcare exchange and that's been money that we've got in hand already from the federal government. So many of these preparations we've, shall I say, had them paid for, or we're well prepared for now. That's the law of the land. And shame on the state, in my opinion, if we don't move to be ready to take as much potential advantage and opportunity from what's offered to us. In many cases in the past, for many years, we weren't good in Connecticut at doing that. And that reflects in the money, or lack thereof, that we've received routinely from the federal government as a return on the tax dollars that we send there. So I'm pleased with those efforts. If something should happen that would change the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, we'll adapt and move on, I am sure, to comply with the laws necessary.
Mr. Russo, if you want to.
Well, the president likes it being called Obamacare, so that's what I'll use. My problem with it is, there's good and bad in it, and I've never read it, I've been told that. But when you put legislation through that the people haven't even read, there's no amendments, it just seems like a strange way to conduct business. So, you know, we're going to live whatever the law is and work the best we can and get every dollar that exists. Of course, they got a lot of people exempting out because I guess it's not very financial for them to use.
Okay, and this one, it was particularly addressed to Mr. Saragusa, and it's, as a former state employee, do you believe that your voting on any state retirement plan changes will be a conflict of interest if you're in the legislature and sort of implementing those?
Well, I get a very good retirement, as most state employees do. I got good health benefits, but I have no problem changing retirements or anything. One of the things that's bothered me lately is, you know, these people, they get more than they earn in a year. If they're making $50,000 and they retire at $80,000, to me that's not right. I mean, it doesn't seem like you should make more money retired than you did when you're working. So there's some significant changes that should be made in the employees' contracts to put them in line. You know, at one time state employees didn't receive much money, but they were given plenty of benefits. And that was kind of a wash. But they have since caught up. They got the best benefits that exist, even though they've been changing slightly over the years where, you know, it's not the same. But there, you know, I would have no problem voting on employee issues. I was a union activist, secretary treasurer of the Connecticut State Employees for a year. I served on the first 2 negotiating teams against the state as a union member when they first came out with collective bargaining. I've served on a management negotiating team against the employees. So I'm willing to listen, talk, and change anything that's reasonable.
Representative Ritter, if you want to comment on that, where you feel your opponent would have a conflict if elected to the legislature, given his past employment with the state and his pension?
I don't have the advantage of that, being in that position, I guess. So I'm glad that he feels that that's not something that would be a conflict, because I think that that indeed is an area that we will be addressing, probably not just in this session, but in several sessions to follow.
Okay, and it's still with you, Mr. Saragusa. The next question is, were you satisfied with the progress that was made in education reform in the past session and this effort to close the achievement gap we see in Connecticut?
Well, I rarely have a problem when you're trying to improve the school systems. Probably the only thing I think about schools is, you know, some of it tied into tying teachers to the test scores for evaluations. You know, I know a few teachers, I've talked to them, you know, administrators, superintendents, you know, they work with these teachers. If they don't know by now which ones are not any good, they should be replaced. And most of the problem with getting rid of teachers is the people in charge do not do the systematic things necessary to fire somebody. So I kind of look at it that way. In test scores, you know, we tend to pass kids now, I guess, for their self-esteem. I don't know how many people stay back, but if you should have stayed back because you're not ready for the next grade, how is that teacher going to get you ready for the test for that grade? I mean, you know, some of it's just not practical. We don't all learn at the same pace. We don't all have the same intelligence. Everybody's all over the board. You know, so test scores, I don't like.
Representative Ritter, were you satisfied with the progress the legislature was able to make
Thank you.
in the education?
That was a very, very lengthy discussion, and a very, when I say lengthy, not over a long period of time though, because we only had about 3 months, less than 3 months from the governor's initial proposal until the time when the legislature adjourned at the beginning of May, and a very, very complex subject. So when you say was I satisfied, I think we ended up with positive improvements and opportunities for us to take. I think its ultimate success is going to depend on how quickly or how eager we are to seize on the results, particularly from the pilot programs. I'm pleased to see many school systems eager to step forward and take it on. I think there are a lot of things in the bill I was very pleased about. The emphasis on early reading and additional slots for pre-kindergarten education, critical. And I think everyone in this room surely can understand that until you can read, it's very difficult to write, and the rest follows. And consequently, these are keys to our success, and our continued, should we continue to not pay attention to them, it's only going to be a far more costly and difficult way for us as a state. So I was very pleased with that. I just don't think we will ultimately be done. I don't think that's wrong either. Education is a continuous process. There's no one moment in time when it's appropriate to simply change it for everybody. And certainly, as my opponent indicated, teachers and their relationships to their kids in their classrooms show that to us every day. And so, you know, I was pleased, but we will be back and there will be more conversation, and there should be.
And more specifically, Mr. Sir, this is the first try that the debate over tying teacher tenure and teacher compensation with student performance. Your views on that great debate?
Well, you know, tenure, I believe, is a negotiated end, which the towns and everybody gave them. Yeah. So, you know, tenure doesn't mean you got the job forever. If you don't do the job, you can get fired. All the administrators and the superintendents or whatever got to do it systematically. It's like, you know, people used to say, well, you can't fire state employees. Well, that's not true. I mean, I've had a few people leave. You know, you can do it. You just have to document what the problems are, when you notice them, do the counseling. So it almost don't matter.
Representative Ritter, on that kind of specific debate.
On the tying of the student performance results to evaluation, you'll probably remember that in the bill we passed, there is a tie. It is not in total indication of performance, and it shouldn't be, in my opinion. It is an indicator of performance, and I feel that that's appropriate.
Okay, and Representative Ritter, it's your turn. Looking at our clock here, we've got some time left. We have a question about the 77 tax increases and fee increases, and we've seen that number quite a bit in this election. I think everyone got their talking points on that 77 number of tax hikes increases. It was one of the biggest increases in state history to try to get the budget in balance, and yet we finished the fiscal year with a deficit despite all those tax increases. So was that the right approach, and what is going to have to be done going forward to keep the budget in balance? Representative Ritter.
Thank you. I think it's fair when describing that as the right or wrong approach to describe the whole approach. The legislature was presented with a $3.6 billion budget deficit 2 years ago today. Billion, as they say, with a B. The approach that the governor initiated in his budget and the legislature took up and eventually passed relied on no single mechanism to accomplish balancing a $3.6 billion deficit. Instead, we made budget cuts. We took concessions from state employees, both involving greater contributions for their health care and to their retirement plan. We've got to remember them all, there's 5 of them. We increased taxes. I'm getting tied up. The point being, it was an overall program to operate to reduce that $3.6 billion deficit. We ended up short a little bit less than $200 million, or a little less than, I believe, about 5%. Not bad, since 2 years ago at every single one of these forums we were told that it would be impossible to do this. So while it was not perfect, and I don't believe it was perfect in any way, I think that we did the job without devastating our safety net programs that so many of us here in the state rely on, without devastating help for seniors, for the services and the programs that keep seniors not only safe in their homes, but also healthy and can take care of their health needs later in life if they need them, their long-term care needs. I think that we did a pretty good job all the way around of balancing that. The 77 tax item increase indeed has been described in many different ways. I find it interesting because it's something that, obviously it's a difficult thing to count. It's interesting to note that just of the 77, 19 I think come from one action, and that is to change a tax deduction opportunity at admission to certain sporting events. I think it is. I believe there are 19 of those facilities in the state. And so I don't think that's precisely the right way to count it, but I'm not sure I could get you to a better one anyway. The point being,
If you could, yeah,
yes, if I could get there quick, thank you. The point being that I think that overall we did okay in doing the job and protecting our citizens at the same time.
Mr. Saragusa, overall they did okay, a nice balance of
when you're that
tax
far in the
increases
hole,
and cuts.
when you're that far in the hole, you got no choice but to increase taxes. You know, how they figured it out? Well, they did. That's great. But we got to remember, these billions didn't show up one day. You had to, you know, spend a lot of money to get in this hole. And my opponent, she's been there a while. It had to be 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago that all the spending occurred. I mean, it should have been taken care of right in the very beginning. When are they ever going to catch up with the retirement programs there that are so underfunded? If the federal government was watching it, they'd probably close down the state because businesses can't do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next question is Mr. Saragusa, and the questioner wants to know, what do you see as the most important fiscal challenge facing Connecticut in the next 2 years when you hope to be in the legislature? What's the biggest challenges?
Well, the biggest challenge is keep spending under control and try to, you know, cut spending. And that's a challenge town's got and the state's got.
And Representative Verda, as you're kind of looking ahead, what you hope will be your 2 years, what do you see as the biggest challenges the state now faces?
When I first started, I talked about job retention and job creation and how that has to be our first task, and I believe it should. I'm not, when you talk about a challenge, it's difficult.
A fiscal challenge.
Okay, thank you.
To be fair. Yes,
fair enough, good, because it's going to be a very difficult job, I think, to keep our nose to the grindstone in terms of our budget situation. We made big steps this last year, and I am pleased to say that the state is in better financial condition than it was 2 years ago, but the job is not done, and there's going to have to be a lot more work, and I don't disagree with my opponent at all to that point. We are going to have to be serious about how we do it. And I think that that work is probably not going to be confined only to the next legislative session. I think there may be a little more time after that.
All right, we're going to try to keep it within the hour. We didn't get to quite all the questions, but we got to a lot of them. Great questions. We have an hour tape going, so we don't want to cut anyone off like happened to Linda McMahon on Channel 8 the other night. So, Representative Verdi, you get to go first, and just your summation.
Is there a time limit? Sorry.
Let's say like about 90 seconds. How about that? I got my stopwatch here.
Thank you again for the audience tonight and for your questions. They were great. And also thanks to the day and to the Waterford Public Library for this great facility. And to the audience particularly, your questions were great, but your patience in listening to our answers also, I want to thank you for that. Over 25 years ago, I moved to this community with my husband and my young family, and that's a decision I have never regretted. We raised our family, sent them to the public schools, and now we are planning to stay in Connecticut for many, many more years. I truly believe southeastern Connecticut is the best place to live, to work, and to raise a family, and I'm proud of my continued efforts to keep it that way. To me, the greatest rewards of this job have been working with you, with my constituents, helping with problems, providing constituent services, and working together to find legislative solutions to those problems. At times it's been very difficult, but very, very rewarding. I would be most honored to have your support for another term, and I thank you very much for the years of support that you have given me.
Thank you. Mr. Saragosa, good to go last.
Well, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed my time here. You know, we still miss some of the things, you know. The governor's talking about this new gas incentive. What's going to happen to the oil companies? And, you know, these things are serious. You throw a ton of money at the gas companies who are owned by CLMP. What happens to your local oil dealers? Another thing on oil, there's legislation now that lowers the bad material in oil, you know, and they got legislation that would reduce this quantity of material, but it's hinged on a couple other states doing it first. I mean, New York and Maine do. I mean, to change the oil content would help the environment. These are little things that people have got to know about and work on. You got to work on all facets of the people in the community and develop things. And, you know, our legislators in this area have been in office an awful long time. They've seen all the spending, they've attempted all the cures. You know, if you think they're doing a great job, that's good. But I don't think so. And it's time for some change, for people to really open the book and take a fresh look at everything and not be locked into all the old ways we do it. The day's format, I like it. I hope you do it next time. After I'm elected, I'd be glad to sit up here again. And thank everybody for coming.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you all for coming. Thank the Waterford Library for hosting this. And don't forget to vote.